Why does it take more effort when you walk against the wind holding an umbrella? Because it experiences air resistance. Which type of friction must be overcome for a stationary object to start moving? Static friction. What determines the direction of magnetic force? The directions of the current and the magnetic field. Why are newborns given multiple vaccinations? Because their immune systems are not fully developed. What important resource is produced when rock weathers? Soil. Why can you burn paper by focusing sunlight with a lens? Because of refraction and focusing of light. What is the phenomenon called when heated material rises upward? Convection. What phenomenon does Earth's rotation produce? Day and night. What phenomenon does Earth's revolution, orbit, produce? Seasonal changes. Which planet is the largest in the solar system? Jupiter. What is a chemical reaction called in which energy is released? Exothermic reaction. What chemical reaction occurs during the burning of a candle? Combustion. Which functional group determines the chemical properties of alcohols? Hydroxyl group, O. Which part of the brain regulates human body temperature? Hypothalamus. Which tissue in a plant stem transports nutrients? Phloem. Among a pair of alleles, what is the allele called that is not expressed? Recessive allele. Which tissue in a plant stem transports water? Xylem. Which organelle breaks down proteins within the cell? Lysosome. When energy moves through an ecosystem via food chains, how does the amount of usable energy change at each trophic level? It decreases. What are the two main parts that make up the human nervous system? Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. What do you call a group of populations living together in an ecosystem? Community. What is the wind called that arises from temperature differences between the sea and the land? Sea and land breeze. What phenomenon occurs because Earth's axis is tilted? Seasonal change. What is the phenomenon called when the moon orbiting Earth always shows the same face to Earth? Synchronous rotation, tidal locking. What principle explains why objects float in water? Buoyancy. What causes a change in an object's state of motion? Force. What is the phenomenon called when light changes direction as it enters a different medium? Refraction. Which layer of Earth's atmosphere absorbs ultraviolet radiation? Ozone layer. What is the force that acts outward from the center when an object undergoes rotational motion? Centrifugal force. Which planet in the solar system has the greatest mass? Jupiter. What is the phenomenon called when light passing through a prism splits into various colors? Dispersion. What condition is required for total internal reflection to occur? An incidence angle greater than the critical angle. How can Newton's third law be expressed? Law of action and reaction. What is the sum of an object's potential energy and kinetic energy called? Mechanical energy. According to the second law of thermodynamics, what always increases in natural processes? Entropy. What property of light is demonstrated by diffraction? Wave nature. What does the first law of thermodynamics describe? Conservation of energy. Under what conditions does the law of conservation of angular momentum hold? When no external torque is present. To what is an object's acceleration proportional and inversely proportional? Proportional to force and inversely proportional to mass. What does the phenomenon of light scattering describe? Light being scattered by small particles. On what does the maximum kinetic energy of electrons emitted in the photoelectric effect depend? The frequency of the incident light and the work function. What is a state of thermal equilibrium? A state with no net heat exchange. What phenomenon arises from the tilt of Earth's rotation axis? Seasonal changes. Between which planets is the asteroid belt in the solar system primarily located? Mars and Jupiter. What is the source of the Sun's energy? Nuclear fusion. What is the primary cause of tides observed on Earth? The Moon's gravitational pull. During which geologic era did dinosaurs flourish? The Mesozoic era. Which layer of Earth's atmosphere exhibits the highest temperatures? The thermosphere. What is one major cause of sea level rise? Global warming. What causes a lunar eclipse? Earth positioned between the Sun and the Moon. What does the Bergeron ice crystal process explain? Precipitation formation processes. How do Earth's magnetic poles relate to the geographic poles? They do not coincide. What is the main effect of increased atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration? Strengthening of the greenhouse effect. According to the law of conservation of energy, what happens to energy? It can be transformed but cannot be created or destroyed. Under what conditions does the law of conservation of momentum hold? In a closed system with no external forces. What is the hardest natural substance? Diamond. What is the term for the change in velocity per unit time of a moving object? Acceleration. Which is the outermost layer of Earth's atmosphere? The exosphere. In which organ does gas exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occur in the human body? The lungs. Which is the smallest planet in the solar system? Mercury. What is a major application area of ultrasound? Medical ultrasonography. What is the basic principle of nuclear power generation? Nuclear fission chain reaction. Why do raindrops falling from the sky reach a constant terminal velocity? Because air resistance and gravity are in equilibrium. Why is the speed of sound relatively slow in air? Because the particles are more widely spaced. What happens to sound when an amplifier is used? It becomes louder. Among solids, liquids, and gases, which has the greatest distance between molecules? Gas. What is the process called when a substance absorbs thermal energy and sequentially changes from solid to liquid and then to gas? Change of state. What layer composes the surface of the Earth? The crust. What advantage does using a pulley provide when lifting a heavy object? It reduces the required force. What technology automatically manages plant growth in a smart farm? Sensor-based automation. What is the scientific reason VR devices feel realistic? They simulate sensory stimuli. What number planet from the Sun is Mercury? The first planet from the Sun. Which planet in the solar system has the largest mass and volume? Jupiter. Why does the surface of the human cerebrum have complex folds? To increase the surface area. On what kinds of devices or systems is artificial intelligence primarily applied? Computers and smart devices, among others. What is the technology called that allows AI to recognize images? Computer vision. What is an unconscious rapid response called? A reflex. What do wearable devices that measure heart rate detect? Changes in blood flow. Which brain structure is important for feeling and expressing emotions? The amygdala. How is the frontal lobe related to emotions? Emotion regulation and judgment. Which substance is released when mood improves? Dopamine. Why does a car lurch forward when the brakes are applied? Inertia. Why is insulating tape wrapped around wires? To prevent electric leakage. What is the temperature called at which a substance turns into a gas? The boiling point. Which cells transport oxygen in the human body? Red blood cells. What does the sensor in an automatic door use to detect people? Infrared. What are the main characteristics of Neptune? Blue, gaseous composition and strong winds. Why does a comet's tail point away from the sun? Because of the solar wind. In which part of the brain is tactile, touch, information primarily processed? Parietal lobe. What problems occur if the cerebellum is damaged? Impaired balance and motor coordination. What is the method called by which AI learns on its own? Machine learning. What type of machine learning technique allows systems to make decisions by themselves? Deep learning. What is needed when AI learns from data? Training data. Structures like the eyes, ears, and nose are called what? Sensory organs. What does an atomic number represent? Number of protons. What is the region where electrons are located called? Electron orbit. What is the process called in which radiation is emitted? Radioactive decay. Among alpha, beta, and gamma rays, which has the greatest penetrating power? Gamma rays. How does our body respond when oxygen is lacking? Increased breathing and heart rate. Are star clusters located inside galaxies or outside them? Inside galaxies. Among objects of the same mass, what increases as speed increases? Kinetic energy. What is the phenomenon in which an object keeps increasing its speed when a force is continuously applied? Accelerated motion. What is the phenomenon called when light changes direction upon entering another material? Refraction. Why do black clothes feel hotter under sunlight? They absorb more light. What happens when the north pole of a magnet is brought near another north pole? They repel each other. Which change of water state absorbs the most heat? Vaporization. Through which structures are digested nutrients distributed throughout the body? Blood vessels. What process mainly occurs in the upper course of a river? Erosion. Why does a tumbler maintain temperature for a long time? Its insulating structure. Why are eco-friendly cars becoming widespread? Because they reduce carbon emissions. Why is AI used for climate change prediction? To analyze complex patterns. Why must many countries cooperate to solve the climate crisis? Because climate change is a global problem. How does a dishwasher make dishes clean? By spraying hot water and using detergent. What social problem could decrease with advanced autonomous driving technology? Traffic accidents. What is one situation that lowers immunity? Excessive stress. What is the property of organisms to maintain their internal environment called? Homeostasis. What problem can occur if a motor nerve is damaged? Muscles do not respond. What effect can prolonged stress have on the brain? Decreased memory and concentration. Why are emotions reflected in facial expressions? Because the brain controls facial muscles. What can observing the motions of stars within a galaxy tell us? The mass distribution. The cosmic microwave background radiation is a relic of which astronomical event? The Big Bang. In which state of matter does sound travel the fastest? Solid. How many pairs of chromosomes are present in the human genome? 23 pairs. What is located at the center of an atom and composed of protons and neutrons? Atomic nucleus. What iron-containing protein carries oxygen in human blood? Hemoglobin. Approximately what is the angle between Earth's orbital plane and its equatorial plane? Approximately 23.5 degrees. Why is methane a stronger greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide? Higher radiative absorption efficiency. What is the term for the angular difference between the geomagnetic north and the geographic north? Magnetic declination. What primary nuclear reaction powers the Sun? Hydrogen fusion. What protein is present just before fibrin forms during the blood clotting process? Fibrinogen. What type of galaxy experiences intense star formation when galaxies collide? Starburst galaxy. What is the equation that describes how an equilibrium constant depends on temperature? Van 't Hoff equation. What is the average distance between Earth and the Moon in kilometers? Approximately 380,000 kilometers. What is the term for a circuit condition in which resistance is effectively zero? Short circuit. What is the abbreviation for the data transfer rate measured in bits per second? BPS. What is the phenomenon by which an LED produces light? Electroluminescence. Ultraviolet C, UVC, wavelengths are approximately below how many nanometers? (280 nanometers). Which layer is the outermost layer of Earth's internal structure? Crust. What type of reaction is the rusting of metals? Oxidation reaction. What is the periodic rise and fall of sea level caused by the Moon's gravitational pull called? Tides. What are the three requirements for a combustion reaction? Fuel, oxygen, and an ignition source. What optical device can converge or diverge light to or from a point? Lens. What do we call the table that arranges elements in order of atomic number? Periodic table. What are the three elements of sound? Loudness, frequency, and timbre. What are the three modes by which heat is transferred? Conduction, convection, and radiation. What do we call the time when sea level reaches its highest point in a day? High tide. In which cellular organelle is the genetic material DNA primarily located? Nucleus. In which digestive organ are digested nutrients primarily absorbed? Small intestine. Which lowest layer of Earth's atmosphere is where weather occurs? Troposphere. What is the process called in which atoms form new substances through chemical bonds? Chemical reaction. What is the event called when Earth's shadow falls on the Moon? Lunar eclipse. What protein in red blood cells transports oxygen during respiration? Hemoglobin. What is the approximate average radius of Earth in kilometers? Approximately 6,400 kilometers. What is the property by which organisms maintain a stable internal environment, such as regulating body temperature by sweating? Homeostasis. What is the force that acts between positive and negative charges? Attractive force. What is the collective term for all chemical reactions occurring within a living organism? Metabolism. Why is a camera flash effective in dark places? It utilizes the straight-line propagation of light. What is the effect on the nervous system when neurons are damaged? Decreased signal transmission. What type of nerve action causes muscles to move when commanded? Motor neurons. Which metal is most effective at shielding gamma rays? Lead. What does the heart beating faster during exercise signal? Greater oxygen demand. Which brain part is highly active when suppressing emotions? Prefrontal cortex. What structural brain feature characterizes people who regulate emotions well? A well-developed frontal lobe. If emotions are not regulated, what impact does it have on learning? Decreased concentration. What response causes one to run away or freeze when feeling fear? Fight or flight response. Why do irregular galaxies not have a regular shape? Because of collisions or gravitational influences. Approximately how many light years across is the Milky Way? (100,000 light years). Why do stars in a cluster have similar ages? They formed at the same time. What is the process by which plants use light energy to produce nutrients? Photosynthesis. What is the fundamental cause of wind? Pressure difference. In which layer of Earth's atmosphere is the ozone layer located? Stratosphere. Which is the largest planet in the solar system? Jupiter. What is the phenomenon of heat energy moving from a higher temperature to a lower temperature called? Heat conduction. In which state of matter does sound travel the fastest? Solid. Which nutrient is digested by the enzyme pepsin? Proteins. What is the phenomenon called by which water is absorbed into plant roots? Osmosis. Which organelle in plant cells carries out photosynthesis? Chloroplast. Which molecule stores a cell's genetic information? DNA. What is the process of gas exchange that occurs in the human lungs called? Gas exchange. Which part of the brain regulates human body temperature? Hypothalamus. Which blood cells are responsible for immune function in humans? White blood cells. What is the movement of water molecules across the cell membrane from lower to higher solute concentration called? Osmosis. What structure connects bones to other bones? Joint. What is the shape of Earth's orbital path? Ellipse. What type of rock forms when magma cools and solidifies underground? Igneous rock. What are the sandhills formed by wind in deserts called? Sand dunes. Which harmful type of light does the ozone layer primarily block? Ultraviolet (UV) radiation. During a volcanic eruption, which gas is emitted in the largest proportion? Water vapor. Which scientist first proposed the theory of continental drift? Alfred Wegener. Among the major components of Earth's atmosphere, what is the second most abundant gas? Oxygen. What do we call preserved traces of past life found in rock layers? Fossils. During the water cycle, what is the process called in which plants release water vapor? Transpiration. What is the innermost layer of Earth's interior? Inner core. What is the point on Earth's surface directly above the focus of an earthquake called? Epicenter. What is the phenomenon of elevated temperatures in urban areas called? Urban heat island effect. In carbon neutrality, human-caused carbon emissions are made equal to the amount of what? Carbon absorption. Why can a drone fly? Lift generated by its propellers. What principle does an electric kettle use to boil water? Electrical resistive heating, Joule heating. By what method does an air cooler chill the air? Evaporative cooling, using water evaporation. How are antibiotics different from vaccines? They treat bacterial infections. Thanks for watching all the way through. Share your science knowledge in the comments. Your support helps us create even more science quizzes. See you in the next one.